So I know I've said this before, but the first 8 days your property is on the market as a rental is the absolute most crucial time to be on the market, right? And pricing coming out of the gates is so important. How could pricing it right or pricing it wrong cost you thousands of dollars? So as an owner, you have an opportunity to put your house on the market. Let's say your tenant is moving out and there's alignment. We have a process of how we get properties on the market, from cleaning them up to getting them, ready for rent, to getting the marketing and everything put together, and then getting it on the market and making sure that it shows as good as possible, so that the tenant is trusting of the product that we're putting out there and our turnaround time, and making sure that we give them the best experience from the beginning to ensure that, again, they feel that this is the house for them and hopefully long term. Okay. So now we talk about pricing. And pricing is so absolutely important in the first 8 days. We've been able to discern that in the first 8 days, if your property is priced right, you are in a significantly sweeter spot of landing that tenant. And not just the tenant, but a better tenant. We deal with this on the sales side as well when we're selling houses. We want to be priced right out of the gates. But there's a methodology that we used to hold, maybe when it was a little more old school, before technology really took over from a marketing perspective. And it was like, well, let's just see if this price will do better long term. Let's just try it, and let's just see if we can get an extra few $100s out of it a month right out of the gates. Back in the day, that might not have been as bad of a decision. But what's happened over time is now it's super easy for a prospect to see a property online and see how it stacks up to everything else in the neighborhood right next to it. If I'm looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in South Mountain up against 24th Street and Baseline, I'm going to look at all those houses. And let's say I'm looking between 1,500 to 1,700 square feet. Awesome. I can do that search, pull it a radius out, see what's currently available, look at each of the neighborhoods, as you know, just straight from an aerial view, and go, which one do I want to choose? What's the current situation look like of how much people are charging in this one versus this one versus this one? And then go and see these properties. Now, if my price is right, then the opportunity will present itself in a way where we're getting more showings. We're getting, in the first 8 days, we've got more traction, and we're getting applications, because that's what we want to do. We want to hit it in the first 8 days. Why is that? So the market's going to speak to us immediately, right? And for this one, I did take some notes because I want to make sure that I hit on a couple of key points. When your property first hits the market for rent, that's when it's going to get the most exposure, not just from us, okay? But from a standpoint of exposure, what we're trying to do is, when we syndicate this and put it out there to all these different sites that we pay for. So talk about upscaling our marketing. We have marketing agreements with some of the bigger sites like Zillow. Zillow, 80% of our rental pool comes from. That's where most people are finding rental opportunities right now. So it makes sense that, yeah, we've got to spend a little money on Zillow to make sure that our rentals get boosted, and that we're optimizing them so that we get popped to the top of the rung. Okay. So what's important is that our marketing is dialed, so there's a strategy that we have to follow to ensure that we're getting bumped up to the top of the listings. What detracts from that is time on market. So no matter how sexy a listing is, at the end of the day, if new listings are hitting the market, they're going to show up better than something that's been on the market for 2 to 3 weeks, because at the end of the day, they're new, they're fresh, they're hot, and that's what people want to see, because tenants are not looking 70 days out, 80 days out. They're looking 30 days out. Most tenants have gotten with it, and they recognize that, hey, if they're looking for something that they're going to need to make a decision with, they're going to have to make a decision within 30 days. We don't hold properties for much longer than 30 days, right? Because at the end of the day, why wouldn't I just do a price drop and get somebody who's going to move in sooner? Because at the end of the day, I'm not caring so much about $100 or $200 extra a month when I'm losing a full month's worth of rent, because it doesn't pencil. It doesn't make sense. If the odds are that my tenant stays for a few years, but on the front end, I'm losing a month or two in rents. How does that math, right? And that's what we've got to be thinking about from the standpoint of how quickly we need to get these things moved on the market. So once you hit the first week on the market, and think of the rental market as every week is a new week in the rental market. There is a new pool of potential renters in that pool every single week. Boom, boom, boom. We track rentals, like we track new tenant applications or new inquiries every single week. And there are certain weeks of the month that are better than others. And it's pretty consistent. And it's probably as you'd expect, right? So when we track those numbers, it's like, okay, if we hit on this week and on this week, what does that look like from a standpoint of how much interest are we going to get on this property? Well, if we've been on the market for 2 to 3 weeks already, now we've got all these new rentals that are actually being added to the market as well to compete with. If a person walks through your property the first time and they think it's overpriced, and we do some price drops, yes, those tenants do receive notifications that the price has dropped on the property that they saw, but do they circle back around? That's a question that I can't answer. I don't know how often it is that they end up circling around, but from my team, I know that that's not very often. Because at the end of the day, it's like once they've seen it one time and they feel it's overpriced, they've moved on. They feel that the value wasn't there. So let's see. So if we don't have activity on a property, that tells you something. Is it the price? More than likely. If we get showings and the price is right, then it can be a condition issue, right? It can be an issue that is some sort of obsolescence from the neighborhood or from the house itself, or something that we can't really tell by looking at it from a computer. When somebody's out at the property, what is it that we're seeing? Is it power lines? Is it the rooms are all too small? Is it something like that? We do get feedback, but that stuff is helpful. But again, in those first 8 days, the most important piece in all of it is pricing. Let's see. So days on market become a monster red flag in the rental market. And then more than likely, you're looking at having to do price reductions. From price reductions, you're also at that point having to concede when somebody comes to the table and they're thinking, hey, why has this property been on the market so long? What am I missing? I want a discount, and if that's what they're going to end up asking. When we price it correctly, it creates more competition. It creates better tenant selection, right? Because we have more opportunities, more at bats with potential tenants. It creates faster occupancy, of course, and then less vacancy loss. And vacancy loss is really what we're trying to avoid here. An extra $100 a month is probably not going to negate or if you got that extra $100 and you had to wait 2 months for it, you're losing 2 months in rent. It's not gonna math. So in these situations, again, we think of data beating emotion from our properties, from us being owners. What are the things we want? I'm thinking about how much I need to make on this property. Well, rents aren't based on how much I need to make. Rents are based on what the market's willing to pay, right? I'm basing the rent on, well, what's my mortgage payment? How much do I owe on this? The market doesn't care about that either, right? The market doesn't care about how much I owe on a particular property or what my financials look like. It's just what the market will bear. It also isn't based on what your neighbor got 6 months ago. It definitely is not, right? Because the market can shift and the market changes. And it could be in December that you're renting it. It could be December that they rented it. In December, it's tougher to rent, right? Just is. And then again, what it is based on is what renters are willing to pay today. And by putting it out there to the universe and getting that sample, you're gonna get it. And that feedback, making those adjustments in those first 8 days is so important. So if there's anything I can leave with you on this one, it's, hey, as we're pricing your property, we're gonna give you that feedback. We're gonna give you those numbers. We've really gotten dialed when it comes to what are we going to get for your property. There are some, of course, that are going to be outliers. Where we see that is more in the luxury properties. And then sometimes we'll see that in like the historic areas where it's really hard, and properties that have a charm or some sort of characteristic that isn't normal, isn't something that you'd see from property to property. But the good news is for most of the properties that we manage here in the Valley, it's very much the market of, consistency. The neighborhood doesn't really shift much from, if you find comps in a particular neighborhood, you're probably going to get something pretty close uh, for the next house that is very, very similar. Hey, I hope this information is helpful. Again, when it comes to ownership, we need to be paying attention to what the prices are to get these things moved. It overall is more important to have a property moved quicker than to leave it vacant and allow for that vacancy, which digs into profit. When we're pricing a property, we're basing it on the annual, not necessarily just the monthly, because oftentimes that monthly number isn't going to support what the market is really doing. Hope this helps.